Welcome to the review of 10 Questions for Theists.
Today, we are going to be responding to Answers in Reason, which is one of my favorite atheist channels.
They're kind of like a cult, aren't they, Stephanie?
The intangible concepts that we can think of that are gods purely exist in our minds.
But just posing the question, I don't think that the intent is to commit to pretending it's true.
Because at the end of the day, it just seems like we're just making arguments from incredulity.
Hello and welcome to Answers in Reason's 10 Questions for Theists review. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And tonight we will be addressing question 2.
Okay, question 2 was, if there was one religion completely different to your own that you could choose to be true, what would it be and why?
So the idea of this one was to suppose that, your religion had been proven false. And which other religion did you find attractive qualities in? And I think this is an interesting question because there are some people who don't look outside their own religion. And there are others who have actually looked and looked and looked really in depth at a number of different religions. And I myself, when I was, coming out of Christianity, moved from religion to religion because I was desperately looking for something. And I found a number of great things in loads of different religions. So the question was just to see how much someone had thought about this question and what qualities that they actually found in other religions that were attractive, even though they don't actually believe in it.
Makes sense. And it's a good question.
So here's the first video.
Okay, Pritchett, if you could pick another religion, not just another denomination of Christianity, to be true, if you found out yours was false, I'm going to entertain this. I'm going to answer it. Yeah. What would you say?
Well, I mean, if I could pick any, I would just create my own and say that.
Pritchettarianism?
Yeah, Pritchettarianism, that would be the most ideal, right? Because you could create a God in your image, and then you could...
well, the one God came up with would be the one that's most ideal.
Well, no, it'd just be the one that...
The one that's most self-serving?
Right. There you go. And so, I don't think that that's what he's looking for.
No.
I mean, what other world...
of a religion that actually exists.
Yeah.
I even was tempted to go with Jediism because there are some... I think it's fake, but they're worshipers of a religion, Jediism. Yeah. Because I think if I could make that true by wanting it true, and then it doesn't mean that I'm going to be force capable or have a lightsaber, but at least it means those things exist out there, and maybe I could get behind that. That said, there's a lot of Jedi ideas, mostly revealed in the prequel trilogy, that are opposed to much of what I believe, right? So, yeah. So, but anyway, of real religions, I've got an answer. It's going to go a little long, so you give an answer.
You and I are fire and brimstone people.
Yes.
I don't commit on what that brimstone,
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's literal fire and brimstone.
But we're fire and brimstone people. But I think universalism is false. But I do have those impulses, right? Not that I believe it, but it's like if I could take my pick. I think about the most enjoyable religious experience outside of Christianity that I have is probably a liberal form of Judaism, like Reform Judaism.
See, I thought about that.
Not conservative or Orthodox, but the Reform tradition, because that's basically a quasi-Torah universalism kind of religion, practice of Judaism. And, I see the appeal of it because it doesn't drag you into the more stricter forms of Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, and I guess what's the worst thing is still be kosher if
Yeah. So you're willing to put up with some not very ideal,
but it's still a monotheistic faith, yeah. And I don't think that I could go, polytheistic, and I don't think that I could go pantheistic. So it would probably be for me a Reformed Judaism.
Bahare Haidari says, "My king is a Jew. His name is Jesus." Yeah. Amen. All right. So my answer to this is simple. I thought about some form of Judaism because, first of all, why would I maybe want that to be true? Like if I'm getting to, I mean, that is what this question is based on.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we want to make clear it doesn't matter what two guys in Indiana think. It matters what God thinks. But if I'm taking this question and answering it honestly, why would that be something that I would want? Well, partly because I have a lot of I come with a lot of prerequisite material that I know about Judaism already, right? So that would be helpful. But I thought I'm going to really take this thing and go with it the way I think they want, which is no. Go very different.
Get out of your Abrahamic traditions,
right?
So I don't think they necessarily required that.
They didn't, but they did say denominations.
Don't change,
but
don't jump from.
But so I want to read you something from a book. This is a great book. Everyone ought to have. It's called Reason for the Hope Within, edited by Michael J. Murray and forward by Alvin Plantinga. These were a bunch of philosophers, primarily from, I think, Notre Dame. This section was written by Robin Collins. And this is what he said about Ramanuja and Madhva schools within Hinduism. Now, I want you to think about this. Unlike Shankara, both Ramanuja and Madhva took a realistic attitude toward the world, claiming that there are really distinct things and selves. Thus, they denied Shankara's doctrine of Maya. So the idea that the world is illusory and that really there is just this overarching unity. Well, this guy's saying, no, there's real different stuff out there, and that's important. Moreover, they affirmed that Brahman is a personal God. So that's a difference, a personal God rather than an impersonal God, who is omnipotent, omniscient, eternal, timeless, perfectly free, and perfectly good and loving. In these ways, their belief systems are similar to that of Western theistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But beyond this, both of these schools have special similarities with Christianity. First, like Christianity, they believe that God has become incarnate in human history though unlike Christians, they believe that this has happened many times. For example, and I'm not going to keep reading a whole lot, but following the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, they hold that during particularly dark periods of history, God became incarnate to, quote, destroy the sin of the sinner and establish righteousness. Second, both of these schools strongly emphasize salvation by grace, though without any doctrine of atonement. For instance, following an oft-repeated teaching of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Ramanuja claims that that we are saved by the grace that the Lord bestows on those who devote themselves to God in love and faith. Moreover, Ramanuja claims that grace is so powerful that those who really devote themselves to God will achieve union with God and final liberation from the cycle of rebirths at the end of this life. Now, there are other problems like the eternality of the universe, and Jonathan, they believe in the eternality of every individual soul, so that and this creates a particular problem for the problem of evil as related to this tradition within Hinduism, because what it means is Jonathan, the identity that we are referring to as Jonathan Pritchett, has been in a cycle of reincarnation literally infinitely into the past, which means you have experienced a certain amount of hell infinitely into the past. So this is how God set it up. This creates some particular problems that are more difficult on this view than on Christianity, I think. Yeah. Nevertheless, as I look at this, I think that the summation statement that that Robin Collins makes is pretty telling. He says this, then I'll stop. In my judgment, Ramanuja's, and to the lesser extent Madhva's, worldview presents a philosophically viable alternative to that of Western theism and Christianity. Do you understand what's being said? This philosopher is saying, philosophically, this is
it has all the trappings.
It's a viable alternative to Western theism. Yeah. Moreover, although Ramanuja's beliefs in the eternality of the soul appear to present him with a serious problem of evil, in my judgment, it is not central to the rest of his worldview. He could ditch that. He could ditch that view that people are just like eternally existing. Though then he might have trouble with his view of the inerrancy or infallibility of Hindu scriptures, because Ramanuja claims that they teach this doctrine. But the bottom line is there are some obviously differences. Now, what Collins goes on to say is we could still do apologetics with respect to Ramanuja's
in very
version
similar
of Hinduism,
ways.
but we would do it. But we could criticize them, but couldn't do it. His view is you couldn't just rely on philosophical arguments. You'd have to get into historical arguments, like for the resurrection,
right,
in order to tilt it one way or the other. But because of that,
I mean, as far as the eternality stuff, some philosophical arguments.
We think we could bring philosophical issues, but like he says, that guy could ditch that part of his view and still have a Bible. So I think if it's true that it's that similar to the things that I find beneficial and valuable about Christianity, the grace, the love, all those kind of things, a God who has all the omni properties and all this sort of thing, then that is the one that came to my mind. Although I have to admit, in terms of like practical understanding how people might live that out, there's a tradition within Hinduism of these bhakti cults, which are like little churches, for lack of better terminology, within Hinduism focused on one particular God. So that you might even say something like, this is the one true God. And there are Christian bhakti cults. Yeah. We wouldn't recognize them as Christian, but their focus is Jesus. And they may say something like, he's the one true God. But many of them don't mean that there aren't other gods out there. It's just that he's their God. Like you might say, there is no team but the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, well that you're not saying there literally aren't other football teams. You're just saying they're the ones you're interested in and interested in worshiping. but that's interest. I thought that was an interesting.
Yeah. So Kenneth G has he has an interesting comment up there. He says, "So that question makes no sense. I think it is insidious to ask someone to ponder on something that they do not believe is true, as if it were true. It is an invite to cognitive." I don't think that it invites cognitive dissonance. And I also don't want to say it's insidious because, it's a thought experiment.
It's not saying pretend it's true.
Right.
Or function as though it's true.
Right.
It's saying, which one would you like if you found out Christianity was
right.
false?
I don't think that was the intent. Now, I do see if the goal is for you to do those things, and I would agree, because you're trying to hold two competing, because you could look at people who've deconverted from any religion, including Christianity, and there is a period of time where they do go through cognitive dissonance, right? Trying to square new beliefs with the ones that they've had for so long, right? And it does cause them problems because it's a worldview shift, and there's always a transitory period in shifting your worldview. So if you were to actually believe it, it's true now, coming from a different background. That I would agree. But just posing the question, I don't think that the intent is to commit to pretending it's true in that sense. Just if you had a preference, I think it's just exploring the idea.
Yeah, saying, well, what do you like if you found out this wasn't true? The thing about it is, it's a mark of a philosophically interested mind is someone who is happy to entertain hypotheticals, in my opinion.
And so I don't think, there's a way that I would agree with that comment if that's what I thought this guy was trying to get people to do, but I don't, because I didn't get the sense that he was trying to get me to question my own beliefs, to entertain what other kind of religious organizing principle would I want the world to have.
I see Bearded Heretic is in the chat. Is Bearded Heretic the guy on the left or the guy on the right? Either one of Answers in Reason? If you are, I'd love to know that. And thank you for showing up, whoever you are.
Well, there's the follow-up comment says the intent is to raise doubt. Well, it failed. But
I don't think that was his intent.
The intent for Braxton and I to do this, in speaking to atheists and speaking to Muslims and is to raise doubts too. So that's fair game, because I want them to doubt their faith because Christianity is true, and I want them to become Christians. But anyone who's proselytizing for anything, their job is to raise doubts so that they can convince you of something, including Christians. And that's kind of the business of apologetics, when you go on offense to criticize another worldview. So, that's fair in the sense that if their intention was to create doubt, which is what a lot of content criticizing Christianity on YouTube exists for, we also exist in one sense to cast doubts on other worldviews as well. Mm-hmm. We're not just trying to play defense all day long. We're trying to preach the gospel and demonstrate that Christianity is true, which means you need to doubt these things that you hold to be true because they're false beliefs and we think that they're harming you. Mm-hmm. So,
well, Bearded Heretic says, I'm a guest on Answers in Reason sometimes. Well, I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for showing up. And I am assuming that these questions are asked in good faith. They presumed that about me when many other atheists said, "Oh, he's just trying
to be that slick huckster."
Right. So I'm not going to do that to them. Yeah. And plus, I've interacted some kind of with these guys a little bit.
I get Kenneth's impulse to suspicion, though. We all have that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say I don't think that that's what they're doing.
Not what they're
but
doing.
I do think that there are people who try to do what he is insinuating. But,
All right, let's keep trucking now.
And that was Jonathan Pritchett and Braxton Hunter from Trinity Radio. Thanks, guys. That was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It was a really interesting answer as well. And I'm so grateful that you took it in the spirit that it was intended. It was not intended to cause doubts. It was us pondering about what you thought, or how you thought of other religions. And I'm glad you gave it the charitable reading, because that's what we try to do. And I'm very glad that you did the same for us.
And I tell you what, Braxton, actually, your answer is so very similar to mine. And as you started saying your answer, in my head, I instantly went to the point where there are even, Christian Hindus. and you said it at the end. You said pretty much everything I was going to say. I had a really strong interest to Hinduism when I was younger. I grew up in an area where I was surrounded by a lot of Hindus, and my dad actually lived in India for about 7 months, and he came back and he got very engrossed in the culture. He didn't convert to Hinduism, but he told me more about it than I'd learned at school, and I found it a very, very interesting religion. There's certain parts about it that I don't necessarily like because I think it's false, though if I was to think it true, I would think that they were perfectly acceptable as well. But yeah, no, that was great, actually. I was surprised that you went there, Braxton, so thank you.
And so he says, any other faith besides. Now, I actually have taken a lot of time looking at other faiths. I don't find any of the Nordic faiths, the Old Norse faiths or the Greek mythology or Roman mythology. I don't find any of that compelling one bit. But I can say if I were to be looking at other faiths around the world, number one, I'd reject the Muslim faith, but it's purely because of my Christian roots. The Muslims, a lot of the reasons that the Muslims became, their faith grew so much is because they came into faith as warriors. Right off the bat, Muhammad began slaughtering people. He beheaded a number of Jews. He did all kinds of things. And coming into the faith in a very violent way like that and bringing your religion to others forcefully is not something I would advocate for. So I would not be in line with the Muslim faith. If I were looking at other faiths that seem a little bit more peaceful, I might look across the world over to the Hinduist or the Buddhist faith. Now, the Buddhist faith is kind of a unique faith. It's more of a set of principles. And the Hindu faith is also based on this idea of many gods. And both of them embrace the idea of reincarnation, which the Bible has soundly rejected in numerous passages. And they both also advocate for multiple, well, actually, I can't say both. Hinduism advocates for multiple gods, pantheism, this idea that God is everywhere. Now, I talked to my Hindu colleague, and he told me that they believe that God is both immanent in our world, in everything we see, in every little piece of matter that we see, and also external to it. And he has a belief that there are 3 major gods within Hinduism, although there's thousands of gods in that faith. Now, I'll say that probably would be the one that I would go for if Christianity were completely not around at all, because I do feel like there's a very significant spiritual experience in this world. I would have to find a faith that supports that spiritual experience that I have had. And Hinduism has an ounce of, it has a little bit of truth to it in some ways. Like, for example, the idea that there are spiritual battles going on in spiritual forces. And that is something that you can see in Psalm 82. So listen to what Michael Heiser has to say about that in his book, Unseen Realm. But there is an unseen world out there of spirits. And I think that Hinduism can explain that. And I think that we can explain that through Christianity when we realize that the Hindus are having spiritual experiences, maybe just not with Jesus.
So that was S.J. Thomason with another intriguing answer. Thank you for that, S.J.
Yeah, I found it very interesting that 2 Christian apologists who were quite well educated on Christianity both went for the Hinduism approach. I know she mentioned Buddhism as well because it's a set of principles. But it's interesting that they both mention the same book, both have similar ideas. So I think it shows that, people have thought about these other things to some extent. And how Hinduism shares some pretty common similarities, even if there entirely different religions.
And equally, someone that grew up Christian, as in me, and has some form of affinity with Hinduism as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they're right. Maybe I am a crypto theist, Dave.
It's possible. I'm going now.
No, but you're right. It is really interesting. Buddhism is another interesting one as well, because whilst it is an atheistic religion, there are many takes on Buddhism. There are still, in certain forms of it, supernatural beliefs, and there are, at times, even certain theistic claims, although in general, Buddhism is an atheistic religion.
Yeah.
If I had to pick a religion to be true, like somehow Christianity was proven false, and I have to pick another religion to be true that I just want to be true. It sounds weird, but something about Norse mythology sounds really cool to me. The whole concept of Valhalla sounds really cool. So I would say something like that. But on the other hand, there's certain types of paganism that like would seem appealing if Christianity was false too. But I'm not to get into too much into the weeds with that too, I guess.
Yeah, no, this one for sure. Like I'm definitely like a person that has trouble with like hypothetical questions. So when I first thought about this, it's like, well, if Christianity, like the way I understand Christianity is like it seems like if Christianity is true, it is the religion that is the best. So it would make no sense for me to, want anything else to be true. But I know that's beside the question. So when he brought up like Norse mythology, that got me thinking like, okay, what's something basically like what would be a fun, more like just kind of cool or something. And I thought actually whatever, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it would be cool if like the oldest religion ever was actually real or whatever that is. I'm not like super, but it'd be pretty crazy if like, like cavemen like got it right. You know what I mean? I thought that would be pretty interesting. Like they just came up with this like worshiping the sun or whatever, and just like that actually was like the true religion. Like we still did that to this day. I thought that was fairly interesting. But then paganism or something, and then I'm just like thinking like whatever religion believes in magic or whatever, that'd be pretty cool too.
Yeah. If I could I would probably make up a religion to be honest with you.
True.
But growing up, I used to like wish Dragon Ball Z was like a realistic thing, so I could go Super Saiyan.
There you go.
But that's out of the question.
Yeah, that's not. I don't know if Dragon Ball Z counts as a religion, but maybe to some people.
So that was Spartan Theology and Exploring Reality, with quite a different answer to the previous two.
Yeah, very, very different. And Spartan Theology seems like such a nice guy, as does Exploring Reality. They seem to have fun with this question, so I thought the answers were worth checking out or presenting to people as well.
Definitely, and I agree with them. There is something attractive to Norse mythology or any sort of pagan mythology that has some magic to it. I mean, who doesn't want to be able to cast spells and heal people with crystals or anything like that? I mean, how awesome would that actually be?
Well, that's one of the things that gets me when Christians and Muslims, like a lot of them will say, you just don't want God to be true. That's not true. I actually kind of wish God was real, because it would mean that there was this other realm to the universe. And part of that could include like bending the laws of physics. So a religion that allowed us to do those kind of things, I wish something like that was true.
I completely agree with you. And even, the idea of heaven, being able to, my idea of heaven would be somewhat exploring the universe for all eternity and learning absolutely everything I haven't had time to do on this planet, and being able to experience everything that I haven't had the time or the ability to do on this planet, because I'm so limited in that regard. So yeah, and as you say, the additional layer to the universe, there is more to it. There's not just this life. There's so much more that can be had and done and said, and yeah. I actually think that my take on reality is far more boring than the theists' worldview. So
yeah,
it's not that I don't want it to be true. Any of them. There's probably some of them that I have a bit of a bad taste in my mouth about, obviously.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, the idea that there could be something so much more. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, same. And if heaven existed, I finally get all the time I need to read all the books I want to read.
Oh, yeah.
I guess for myself, I haven't thought about this too much, but I've at least been somewhat like fascinated in Hinduism, which he actually brings up there at the end. Not necessarily because I'm like super familiar with it. I just find that like, I don't know, I guess mythological scale, I guess, to Hinduism is quite interesting. Like this notion that there is sort of this whole hierarchy of beings besides humans and angels, and there's actually like gods and demigods and broader scales. I guess like I'd at least be interested in Hinduism, and I think it might be able to like be able to have a large metaphysical worldview picture that manages to sort of satisfy a lot of the needs that human beings have, and also as a sort of philosophical system. I think it has some strong weight to it, especially since I think some versions of Hinduism do accept classical theism, but they'll probably be more non-personalistic in it than even classical theists like Catholics are, or Jews or other classical theists. Yeah, it would be a much more sort of neutral, I guess, grounding of being, rather than a more personal grounding of being that Christianity tends to favor. I guess maybe like the Greek pantheon, that might be an interesting, I guess, element, an interesting religion that I think might be interesting to be if it were true. But that's just me.
How's it clicking? Is it better?
Yeah, I think it's better.
I put my headphones in. Maybe that will make a difference.
Okay, I'll go. I don't really want another religion to be true, so I don't have a good answer here. But I do find Hinduism to be interesting, like you said, John, in that it has, ancient roots, so that at least, has something going for it in that regard that I find interesting. And it's like, it's still a major world religion, but yeah, I don't find things that I don't think are true. Like I don't wish they were true, so I don't have a strong preference here.
I'm somewhat sympathetic to, prior to me becoming a Christian, I was really interested in Taoism, and I'm also sympathetic to perennialism. And actually, I thought Hinduism was a good answer, John. That was a halfway decent answer. I thought the Taoism is just pure philosophy. Was always, I don't know if I would say I would want it to be true, or I think there's truth in it, because that's kind of why I was interested in it. It's more of like, the Tao is the way, and it's kind of like you could even say like the Tao is physics, and you make sort of your peace, you reconcile yourself with the way the world actually is in some ways. So I think there's stuff about it that I like and I'm partially sympathetic to, and I thought was cool and interesting. And then the spiritual aspects of Hinduism, same idea. There's aspects of Hinduism and perennialism that I'll even see now and be like, yeah, that makes sense to me. So those would be my three answers.
Yeah. And I guess I will say one thing, like, I think for Hinduism, it's one thing that's, I guess, been sort of a blockade for me, and even like taking it as a live option, is just how sort of foreign it is, I guess, to my more Western and cultured mindset. I'm sure there are plenty of like Western-minded
have you
people that
watched?
became
You've
Hindus.
watched Arayuna's channel, right? Where
Yeah,
because the guy who we had on who debated Matt Dillahunty is technically a Hindu, but he's very general Westernized, and it's more philosophical philosophy of religion, and he's influenced by a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same like Jordan Peterson type stuff that we talk about all the time. So
that is cool. Yeah, and I guess there is a strong like intellectual background even within Hinduism, that like there is plenty of like various sects within Hinduism that were sort of like philosophically competing against each other regarding like how best to understand God and the gods and their religious texts and things like that. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more to it than I probably am even fully aware of course, that actually probably deserve quite a bit more care or I guess research on.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a whole school of epistemology associated with it that's different, and they were the first quantum physicists in some ways. The Vedanta Hindus were, at least. Yeah. They were the first idealists. They were the first. They were very similar to the German idealists. Were influenced by them.
Yeah. Spartan Theology is saying Greek pantheon would be horrible to be true. The gods can be unpredictable and petty.
That's called fun. That's called fun, Spartan.
Yeah.
That's like their rock star gods. Like, oh, I decided to wipe out your city today.
Yeah, I guess if you take like the stories about the gods to be like literal, but I would imagine that like more intellectually minded believers in the Greek pantheon would just think that like there's a sort of personal being that is related to, I don't know, the warfare. And so that when you're in that mode of warfare, you're in a sense
you're channeling the god of
being.
war.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly how it is.
And then that way, it wouldn't be like, oh, Mars is this sort
capricious,
of
mean god.
Yeah, exactly. It's just that when you're acting like Mars, you're in a sense worshiping him and embodying him. But
I'm sure there's some sort of coherent rhyme or reason to the pantheon of Hindu gods too. There's some sort of coherent psychological underpinnings to why Shiva and why this, and in the same sort of way that you just said.
I'm sure that's probably right.
So that was Craig Reed, John Buck, and Dry Apologist. And again, there was this leaning towards Hinduism there from both John and Dry Apologist. John also mentioned the Greek pantheon. And Craig had a very different answer, and one of his answers with Taoism. And that's akin to one of your responses to this question, isn't it, Dave?
It is. I kind of like the idea of Taoism, which is basically going with the flow, not fighting reality, accepting reality as it is. The whole concept of Wu Wei. It's kind of interesting, and it doesn't have these sort of evangelical or fundamental kind of teachings that would lead you to be sort of like the worst of the theists that we see, like the worst of the Muslim apologist or the worst of the Christian apologist, or even like, say, Hindus. Like you can get some pretty extreme Hindus. So I find that very interesting. And of course, we have to include Craig and John because they're both hilarious people.
Of course. Yeah, so
and, he'll give us another kicking if we don't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've only just recovered from my last beatdown. Yeah. I have to tell my wife where I get all these scars from, and yeah, these guys online, they just destroy me all the time.
Yeah.
Can't walk for days.
But like you said as well, it's interesting how Hinduism was brought up. And John had slightly different reasons for choosing Hinduism than Braxton and SJ did.
Yeah, definitely. He did admit to more ignorance on the topic as well. but still that there was something that he found intriguing about it. And it seemed that Craig was also empathetic to the idea of Hinduism as well, and knew a fair bit about it. So, I mean, what's encouraging here is you have a number of theists that have actually spent some time and looked into other religions, or can admit when they are a bit more ignorant of other religions as well. Some of the other response videos and the like that we got, there were people that said, well, I don't know anything about other religions, which is fair enough. I would encourage everyone to actually check out other religions as well. There's some really interesting stuff that you can learn a hell of a lot about different cultures and the way they see things, and and it's just interesting. It is just interesting to see the different way that, well, as I say, different cultures and societies have evolved and got these different beliefs, and how there are some similarities between cultures as well. It's almost like that there could be some form of truth there. It's like when you're comparing like Eastern and ancient Greek philosophy. They've come up with some of the same ideas, and they're so far apart from each other, and there's not going to be any real travel between the areas at that time. Yet they've come up with the same ideas completely separately. And I find it amazing how it's sort of come in through various religions. There are certain things that seem to be true in every religion or society or philosophy or whatever. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me that finds that sort of thing interesting, but I do.
No, I do as well. And I mean, there's a couple of things that could be said here as well. Like, there are theists that argue that all religions have some truth to them, like you said, because they're all looking at God through particular cultures. So they're all seeing aspects of God, but never quite getting the whole picture. And this seems to show something like that. So people, like SJ and Braxton brought up, that there's some similarities. And like you just brought up, it seems to show that there are similarities across culture. So you could see why people come up with this idea that all religions have some truth to them. It's just that it's sort of like the blind man looking at the elephant. They're feeling out the elephant, and because they all have different parts of the elephant, they're not really describing the elephant in its entirety. But if you put the whole picture together, you could say, well, look, maybe this is the bigger picture. And I'd say another interesting thing that this brings up is a lot of atheists claim, well, the only reason you have that religion you do is because you were brought up in culture X or culture Y, and you've never explored the other religions. And I think we can safely say that there are those who kind of hold to their beliefs, but they have looked into these other religions and they still retain theirs. Yes, maybe there's some bias there that's making them hold to that one, but it shows that there are people who, and quite devout believers, who go out and look at other religions and still retain their own.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and as we said, there were some that hadn't looked into any others. So that statement that it is true for some people, but it's not true for all. And I think this is a hasty generalization that we atheists can make about theists. You don't know anything about any other religion, so that's why you stick with that one. You were brought up with that religion. And as you say, yeah, okay, there is always going to be a bias for a religion that you are brought up in. But I mean, if you understand someone like Craig's story, he was brought up in religion, but never really believed. He was sort of agnostic, but went with the flow. And it wasn't until he was in his 20s that he was actually convinced of a God existing. So again, that statement that it's only the one that you're brought up with doesn't always hold true.
Exactly. And I mean, if you think about all the people who are now adopting something like paganism, I'm pretty sure most of them weren't brought up in paganism.
No,
They're just,
definitely not.
they're finding some attachment there that helps them. I guess you could call it pragmatic religion.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
It's a shame we didn't get more answers from pagans.
All right, that would have been great. I had really hoped that we'd had a wider variety of responses, but I think we only got one video response from a secular theist, and then pretty much all of our other theistic responses that were video responses were all from some form of Christian. I am hoping, though, that as we're recording these videos, we do get some more answers come in, and maybe as we start releasing them, people will suddenly go, "Oh, I wish I'd responded." Maybe we can do a follow-up video to any new and interesting questions.
Like if Cafe or Ocean Keltoy wanted to respond, I think those would be really interesting, and we could cover those in an expansion pack kind of episode.
I'd like to do that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the video for question 2. And I must say, I am surprised by the results, especially how many different theists actually said Hinduism. But there were some really great answers in there, and I'd like to thank you all for them.
Same. They were really good, and I really enjoyed them. And it just made me think a little bit more about how people approach their religion.
Oh, definitely. And hopefully some of our atheist viewers who might have approached things in a very single-minded way might realize that, hey, not all theists that you interact with are exactly the same, and some of them have really thought about things a lot deeper than you realize.
Yeah, and again, I want to reiterate and say thank you to everybody who approached that question in the way that it was intended and gave it a charitable reading rather than reading it with any suspicion.
So, you've been watching Answers in Reason. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, all.